Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Bitter Pill. I'm your host, Jeff Melton. And tonight we're going to talk about a recent, basically organized set of attacks against Jill Stein by the Democrats, and primarily, interestingly, by progressive Democrats, quote unquote, progressive Democrats, such as Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, AOC, um, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General of Minnesota, who ran for the DNC chair position as kind of I don't know, a reform candidate, to the extent that anyone in the Democratic Party is on the left, a left candidate. Mark Pocan, the uh, chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Um, Georgia State Representative Ruwa Roman, who's a Palestinian American who is one of the leaders of the uncommitted movement and was supposed to give a speech at the Democratic National Convention, and then they, uh, they didn't let her, even though the speech was vetted and she endorsed uh, Kamala Harris, and uh, so on. And all these people are just total sellouts. And then, in addition, interspersed with all that, Jill Stein and Butch Ware did an interview on a popular podcast called The Breakfast Club. You may remember it as the podcast where Joe Biden was interviewed by them, and he said, "If you don't vote for me, you ain't black," or if you don't prefer me to Trump, you ain't black, or some stupid bullshit like that. And yeah, it's got a huge following. 5.5 million followers on Twitter. On YouTube. They've got a radio, or their show appears on the radio, and all sorts of social media. So, um, you big audience. Generally, the audience is just sort of normie liberals, mostly black. So it was a great opportunity for them. So I'm going to talk, I guess, first about AOC's attack on Jill Stein, and then we'll take a look at some highlights of the interview and of the just vicious attacks on Jill Stein and Butch Ware during the interview by one of the hosts in particular, a woman named Angela Rye, who is a basically she's been an aide to Congress people, and I forget exactly what her position is, but she's been very entrenched in the Democratic Party establishment for a long time, and you can tell by the way she responds to them. Okay, so let's get into it. Okay, what do I want to show you first? Okay, I was thinking I guess I'll just try to summarize what AOC said, and then I'll get into Jill Stein's response. Okay, so AOC shared about a 5 minute video on Instagram where the whole thing was just um, bashing Jill Stein and the Green Party, and it's just a really um, bizarre rant and presentation where she's lying on her couch, uh, not even sitting up. I don't know what the hell she was doing with that. I don't know. Is it supposed to symbolize that she's a liar, lying? Is she, you know, um, symbolizing prostituting herself to the establishments? I don't know. It's just really strange. That jumped out at me. But anyway, so basically, she shared all the usual um, talking points about Jill Stein and the Democrats. She didn't, and excuse me, the Green Party. She didn't bring up the uh, Russian asset claims that people are constantly throwing at Jill Stein based on nothing more than a photo of her in Moscow at a banquet for RT that Vladimir Putin also attended and briefly sat at the same table as her. She didn't bring that up, but she basically said Jill Stein only showed up every 4 years to run for president and didn't do anything in between. Either didn't know or was just lying. I lean toward the latter, that Jill Stein wasn't even the candidate in 2020. Hallie Hawkins, the co-author of the Green New Deal, which AOC basically stole the name of and developed this watered down um, resolution that she called the Green New Deal to introduce in Congress when she came in 2018. But anyway, so she didn't know that actually it wasn't Jill Stein that ran in 2020, or she was just lying about it. And she didn't mention anything about the fact that, in fact, Cornel West was initially going to be the Green Party's candidate this time, but he dropped out, and Jill was chosen instead. So basically, the story she tells about what happened is that she and Ajamu Baraka, her vice presidential running mate in 2016, were kind of having a discussion about who should take Cornel West's place, because obviously they need to run candidates, or maybe it's not obvious to you, but third parties have to run candidates for president, given the electoral system in the United States, in order to increase the amount of federal election funding they get, and in order to improve their ballot access. Basically, in a lot of states, you get automatic ballot access if your presidential candidate gets above a certain number of votes. So they're going for that. And also, of course, running a national campaign is the best way to publicize your party, and thus is an important part of trying to grow it and build it. But of course, Democrats aren't going to tell you that, because they don't want the Green Party to grow. So AOC's basically saying, oh, you're not really doing anything other than just running for president every 4 years and losing, and all you do is lose, and um, you know just basically implied that Jill Stein was a fraud or a shill or something. So I'll spare you showing you the video. You can look it up and watch for yourself. But instead, I wanted to show you Jill Stein's responses, which mention things that AOC said. All right, so here we go.
You're just showing up once every 4 years to do that. You're not serious. You're not to me, it does not read as authentic. It reads as predatory.
Jill here. I'm about to board, but very quickly, I just wanted to thank AOC Pelosi so very much for her.
I love that. That's perfect. AOC Pelosi. What's the difference between AOC and a young but already sold out Nancy Pelosi at this point? She's on the same trajectory, and she's most of the way there to just being an establishment shill, an establishment Democrat. She doesn't talk about the Green New Deal anymore. She doesn't talk about Medicare for all. And of course, she's been really wishy-washy about Israel, where she says she wants a ceasefire, but then she supports Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris, who also claim to want a ceasefire, but obviously don't, given that they won't cut off the weapons to Israel. She's voted for weapons funding for Israel, for the Iron Dome specifically. Anyway, let's hear the rest of what Jill has to say here.
Quickly, I just wanted to thank AOC Pelosi so very much for her very authentic concern about growing green power. Clearly, AOC is the attack dog du jour, and the Democrats are running scared, and they should be, because who wants to support a genocide? Who wants to vote for a genocide? And if there's anything that's predatory here, it's saying that your candidate is working tirelessly for a ceasefire when actually they are actively funding and arming genocide, and actually refusing to even consider an arms embargo, which would bring the genocide to a screeching halt. AOC, who's supposed to be in leadership of the Democratic Party, it's amazing if she doesn't know about the anti-democratic tactics and strategies that the Democratic Party uses to crush and silence political opposition. They've been hiring an army of lawyers to throw competitors like me off the ballot. They've been hiring infiltrators and saboteurs and publicly posting job advertisements for those positions. They've been hijacking our public funding in order to keep us off the ballot. And they actually impersonated the Greens to throw us off the ballot in 22 in the Senate race for North Carolina, for example. How is that not fraud and election interference? Also, what's predatory here is stealing the signature issue of the Greens. Our Green New Deal launched in 2010, appropriated by AOC as her signature issue in 2018 without a mention of where it came from. So bottom line is, Americans want more choices. We are that choice. We are the one choice, which is anti-war, anti-genocide, pro-worker, climate emergency. Check us out, JillStein2024.com. Thanks so much.
So yeah, that's a really interesting story about her run for Congress in 2018. She actually worked somewhat with the Green Party back then. She, as we'll talk about later, campaigned for a local Democratic Party candidate in 2017. And then in 2018, a lot of her campaign staff was Green Party people. Personally, as a Green Party member or voter. I'm not that active as a member, but anyway, I would not work with the Democratic Party under any circumstances, but I guess there are some people, Greens, who have done that. So anyway, they were crucial to getting her elected and putting together her platform, which included the Green New Deal. And then once she was elected, she fired most of the staff, brought them to Washington at first, and then got rid of them and hired a bunch of establishment people. But the Green New Deal was written in the early 2000s, I think like 2008 or something, by Howie Hawkins and someone else whose name I forget, Hawkins being the 2020 Green Party candidate, who a lot of people, including me, don't really like because he's terrible on foreign policy and completely uncharismatic, so not really an appropriate presidential candidate. But anyway, one good thing he did was he co-wrote the Green New Deal, and then in 2010, when he ran for governor of New York, that was a major part of his platform. So that introduced it to the world. And so AOC took the name, but instead of putting forward this wonderful, comprehensive climate change program that the Green Party had put together, she created this very market-oriented, capitalist-oriented, watered-down version of it, and didn't even introduce it as a bill that you could vote on and get passed. It was just a resolution and never went anywhere, and she stopped talking about it. Okay, well, let's have a look at another video Jill put together when she wasn't in a rush to board a plane and go to the next campaign stop, that elaborates on her thoughts on AOC Pelosi. So she says, I had more thoughts about AOC calling me and the Green Party not authentic and predatory. She says she's a critic of the two-party system, so why attack Greens? AOC, let's drop the DNC talking points and have a real debate on how to break free from the predatory two-party trap. So she actually is asking AOC to have a face-to-face debate. Of course, AOC is not going to be the least bit interested in that, because her objective is to smear and demean Jill Stein and the Green Party and make them less successful. Although what she succeeded in doing instead was bringing a lot more attention to Jill Stein and the Green Party. Because, let's face it, a lot of Americans have no idea who Jill Stein is or don't know about the Green Party and so on and so forth. So when someone with the audience that AOC has, where she has well over 10 million Twitter or X followers, that's going to get and who knows how many, maybe more Instagram followers. That's going to get the word out to people about who Jill and the Greens are. Even though, of course, she's going to mislead people, but it at least lets them know there's an alternative to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Okay, so let's look at how Jill responds to this attack from AOC this time.
Hi, everybody. I don't know if you noticed, but there was a huge surge of interest in that conversation that AOC Pelosi started about growing Green Party power. And we've only scraped the surface of what really needs to be clarified here. So I want to suggest, actually, how about we continue this in person? I'm sure there are lots of independent journalists out there. Many actually covered this conversation so far. And I'm sure we could continue this live, which would actually be a whole lot more interesting and I think instructive all around. So think about that. Get back to me. In the meantime, I want to clarify several points of misinformation in your video. First, running as a third party, it really doesn't matter whether your party is third, fourth, fifth, or sixth. The question is whether you are an independent alternative, independent of this big money machine that's bought and paid for by corporations and billionaires. Because what good does it do if you're part of the same system and you just have a different name for your party? So from that perspective, I want to say that with all due respect, the party that you say you have run with, the Working Families Party, and no shade against them, but they're not exactly an independent third party. They're basically a second ballot line for Democrats. The Working Families, as far as I know, basically run Democrats or independents on their way to becoming Democrats, like former Governor Cuomo of New York State. He ran several times on the Working Families Party. Wow.
Okay, and let me just something I forgot to mention from Lucy's video. So maybe we should have watched it, but anyway, is she said that in fact she had experience running as a third-party candidate because she ran as a Working Families Party candidate as well as a Democrat. And what the Working Families Party, quote unquote, is, it's not really a party. It's not a third party. It's just a second ballot line that Democrats can choose to appear under to make it seem like they're pro-worker to a greater extent than somebody who doesn't have that additional ballot line. But it's just a scam. It doesn't mean a damn thing. It's not a real third party, and the candidates who run as Working Families Party candidates in New York, who are also running as Democrats, are not accountable to the people, to their constituents. They're accountable, of course, to the Democratic Party and to their donors, same as everybody else. So, it doesn't mean a damn thing. And not just any donors, but the big donors. Now, granted, AOC doesn't. At least last I heard, she still doesn't take corporate money, but she's a loyal servant of the agenda of the Democratic Party. She pretended not to be when she came in, but she has certainly become that. Hence, Working Families Party is just a bullshit way to con people.
Running also on the Democratic Party ballot line. So not exactly an independent alternative. And what's most important is that when you're running in the Working Families Party, you are not under attack by the anti-Democratic Party with their army of lawyers to throw you off the ballot, their paid infiltrators and spies, their hijacking of public funding. You're not in the universe of independent political alternatives. So you are not the yardstick against which to measure green growth. For that, you really have to compare us to other non-corporate parties, which are not bought and paid for. And if you look at those parties, Greens are actually a huge pillar of strength. Non-corporate parties are generally over and done with within 1 or 2 election cycles after being founded. Like a good example is the Peace and Freedom Party, very similar to the Greens. They were founded before us, actually in the 1960s. They were an anti-Vietnam War party. And they had up to 14 ballot lines across the country. And those ballot lines basically were gone within 1 or 2 election cycles. Peace and Freedom Party was beaten back to just one state, California. Greens have managed to hang on to, right now, we'll be on the ballot pretty much across the whole country in this election. And that's what we continue to do and have done now for several decades. Or look at the socialist parties. They were doing great at all levels of government, and they were doing really powerful things and very much, leading the charge for a progressive people-powered agenda. And then Democrats and Republicans changed the rules of ballot access to shut them out. These small non-corporate parties are very much at a huge disadvantage, and they're under attack. The Labor Party as well, which was founded at the time of the Greens with far more institutional and financial support, but they could never get past the spoiler smear campaigning and fear campaigning, and they never actually ran candidates. So
just to interject there, I actually went to a convention of the Labor Party. It was never actually a party. They called it the Labor Party Advocates. And then I guess they did wind up calling it the Labor Party, but they, basically, unfortunately, although there were certainly people among the leadership of the Labor Party who wanted to have a real independent party, there were also people who did not, who wanted to basically, tail the more progressive wing of the Democrats. And so, it never went anywhere and they fell apart. The most successful third party by far in American history, other than the Republicans, which were originally a third party back in the 1850s when they were founded, other than the Republican Party, which was sort of a combination of a big business party and an anti-slavery or mostly anti-slavery party. But the most successful leftist party, rather than just a party that had a left component like the early Republicans, was, as she mentioned, a socialist party who actually they actually elected people to Congress back in the 20s and 30s, and Eugene Debs, who was their presidential candidate 5 times, including the 5th time in 1920, running from prison because he was imprisoned for protesting World War I, as were a lot of other people, and it was just a general effort to oppress anti-war peace activists and members of the Socialist Party and later the Communist Party by the U.S. government. And Jill mentioned here, and I didn't know this, that was when they changed the rules to make it far more difficult for third parties to get on the ballot. That really put a damper on the success of both the Socialist Party and later the Communist Party, and the third parties from then on, including, of course, the Green Party now. So yeah, as she says, the Labor Party came and went in just a decade. Back at, it started, I think, in like 1990.
Well, they were basically dissolved within a decade. The last thing I want to point to is that Greens don't disappear between presidential elections. We are going strong. What disappears is the press coverage. Don't mistake that, actually, for what we're doing. We are a grassroots party, and we're grassroots activists. And it's absolutely false that we go away. It's also false that we simply focus on the presidential race. In fact, we have elected some 1,500, and we currently have 150 active office holders who've been elected and are actually reelected at pretty high rates. That includes, for example, a city councilor in Portland, Maine, where, not coincidentally, that city council just passed a divestment resolution divesting from the genocide being conducted by Israel with the support of this country. For my part, I have certainly been helping candidates in local and congressional and Senate races. I went to the mat for years as part of Doctors for Assange to help fight for Assange's freedom. And, kudos to everybody who worked on that. I've been fighting to protect public funding, in order to break the stranglehold of corporate money on our elections, fighting for ranked choice voting, which would put an end, it would make impossible spoiled elections. But the Democrats are not interested in doing that. They want to have the spoiler fear in order to, extort your vote. We need ranked choice voting so we can actually vote for who we want and not against, the candidate that we hate the most. That leaves us entirely without a moral compass to direct our vision forward. I've been fighting for Medicare for all, for a real emergency Green New Deal, for rent control, and for so-called social housing. And what have you been fighting for, AOC? Used to hear about some of those issues when you started off, but sure haven't heard you much lately. All right, I hope we can continue this conversation.
The contrast between the principled fashion in which Jill Stein has fought for peace and social justice, not just as a presidential candidate, but as an activist for really her whole adult life. And I don't think she mentioned it here, but she's actually run for several offices other than president back in the early 2000s. You can have a look here at what what some of the offices she ran for are. Some of the offices. Oh, goodness, where did my screen go? Yeah, okay. So she was an activist for a long time, as I mentioned, dating back to, I guess the late 60s. She's, I think, in her early 70s. So she was a political activist way back then. And finally, people kind of twist your arm and talked her into running for first for governor of Massachusetts in 2002. She got 3.5%. She was actually allowed into one debate with Romney and the other candidate. So, people in Massachusetts have known about her for a long time. But anyway, in 2004, she ran for state representative in her area. She received 21% of the vote. Actually beat the Republican. In 2005, she ran for the Lexington Town Meeting, which is comparable to the city council in Lexington, Massachusetts, where she lives. And she was elected. She finished first, got 20%, over 20% of all of the votes out of 16 candidates. She was reelected in 2008, and then she quit in order to run for governor. She also, before that, ran for Secretary of the Commonwealth. Didn't win that race, but in 2010, as I mentioned, she quit her Lexington Town Council seat to run for governor again in 2010. And meanwhile, next door in New York, Howie Hawkins was running for governor as a Green. So anyway, yeah. Thanks for the compliment. And yeah, she is just a total liar. AOC is. It's really stunning. Oh, this person says she's 74 years old, hasn't won anything. Well, let's see. Maybe this comment was made before I put the graphic up on the screen, but as I mentioned, in fact, she's won and then been reelected to the Lexington, Massachusetts Town Council. So, Diana, you're full of shit. You don't know what you're talking about. She's run for office several times and won twice on a local level. It's very hard for want a seat on the Lexington Town Meeting Council. It's very hard for a third party to win any office above the local level. The Greens have gotten elected to state office a few times, state legislature. They've on many occasions run for other offices such as governor, such as the House or the Senate, the U.S. Congress. I myself ran for Congress in 2002. I believe I got about 2% of the vote. But I mean, it's just really difficult for a third party to be successful because they make it very difficult for you to get on the ballot, so people actually see your name there when they're going to vote. They shut you out of debates. There's no third-party candidate since Ross Perot, who had billions of dollars and was able to achieve national attention and support that way and qualified for the debates. I don't know if he would qualify today, because at one point RFK Jr. Had the level of support that was required to be in a presidential debate, but they didn't even consider letting him do that. Jill Stein actually in 2012 bought a ticket to attend one of the presidential debates, just to be an audience member. They wouldn't let her, even though she had paid to be able to attend. They wouldn't let her come in, and they arrested her for trying to, use a ticket that she paid for to attend the debate. Imagine that. So they arrested her and hauled her off to. They handcuffed her to a chair for several hours and hauled her off to the police station. She hadn't done anything wrong. They had no crime to charge her with. As far as I know, they didn't charge her with anything, but they just detained her, so she couldn't be in the audience for that 2012 debate. But anyway, as I was saying, so don't let anybody in the debates. As Jill mentioned, they had about $300,000 worth of federal matching funds, campaign funds that they could have used to, for example, get on the ballot in Oklahoma, which has they don't have a petition requirement. They have a $35,000 filing fee if you want to run for president as a candidate in Oklahoma. And, of course, they could have paid that if they'd gotten the $300,000, but they didn't and weren't able to raise the enough funds. It also prevented them from being able to hire enough people to get on the ballot in about half a dozen states, including my own state of Indiana. So she mentioned several of the dirty tricks that the Democrats have played to try and stop the Green Party from being successful. Despite you being a very thoughtful, intelligent, and well-informed person who would make a great political office holder, who understands that even though she wouldn't have a whole lot of support from Congress if she were elected president, and although I would think if she got enough support to be elected president, probably some Congress people would get enough support to congressional Green candidates would get enough support to win seats. But in any case, as she's pointed out, the presidency of the United States is an enormously powerful position. Sure, there are checks and balances. They really do exist. But, the president can do a lot of things simply by executive order. Joe Biden could have abolished the student loan debt that a lot of us have had, just by himself without congressional approval. But he didn't. He could have, done a lot of things that he didn't. And, so could Jill Stein. And she's talked about, a number of different things that she could have done or that she could do if she were elected president without having even to consult with Congress or get support from Congress. Okay, well, okay, I'm gonna have to. I'm sure there's probably another way to do this, but I don't really know how to go about it. Let me share something else with you. Do I not have it in my list of stuff? Okay, well, I'll find it for you. I mentioned that AOC, despite now being totally hostile to the Green Party, uh, actually campaigned for a local Green Party candidate in 2017. So think about what that means. Here she has said that the Green Party doesn't run local candidates. All that the Green Party's focused on is just running a presidential candidate every 4 years, yada, yada, yada. That's all Jill Stein does, according to AOC, is run for president, which it's total bullshit. And anyway, she in fact knows that that's not true. What she said about the Green Party not doing much or anything on the local level, because in fact, as I said, shoot, that's not what I wanted. What am I doing? Sorry. AFC phone banks for the Green Party in 2017 when Jabari Brisport, I believe is his name, ran for I think it was city council or something. So she knew that the Green Party ran local candidates. She just lied about that. So here's AOC back in 2017, all proud of herself for campaigning for the Green Party, which for a local Green Party candidate, which she now claims, they don't have. In fact, the vast majority of Green Party candidates are on the local level, well, the majority anyway, more than 50%. And of course, the only candidate that isn't either local or state is the presidential candidate. This year, which is a little down from a few years ago, the Greens are running 150 candidates nationally, which that's sounds like not very much. It's not very much, but again, recall all the barriers that the major parties and especially the Democrats throw in the way of third-party candidates. Just an amazing story about the 2022 campaign of Matthew Hoh for U.S. Senate in North Carolina, where the Democrats actually hired people to impersonate Green Party leaders and knock on people's doors or call them and try to talk, basically try to suggest that the Green Party had decided to withdraw the candidates that they had signed ballot petition signatures for, and to try to talk them into removing their names from the ballot. Well, they got caught and they got sued by the Green Party, and the Green Party won. I'm not sure how much the Democrats were penalized, but they, they definitely got some egg on their face for their, election fraud is what it is. So anyway, let me now turn our attention to the interview with the Breakfast Club, which took place just a couple of days ago. So it went for about an hour and started off with awesome introductions by Jill Stein and Butch Ware. And as I mentioned, one Breakfast Club host, not a regular host, but a guest host, Angela Rye, was particularly problematic, constantly interrupting Jill and Butch, which people who've watched them interview presidential or just political candidates in general in the past pointed out never happens when they interview, say, Joe Biden or Nikki Haley, who's not even a Democrat, which they are. They're fine with, just talking politely to Republicans, but Angela Rye was in no way, shape, or form polite to Jill Stein and Butch Ware. She kept interrupting Jill Stein, for example, to ask her, to quiz her, like she was on Jeopardy or something, about how many Congress people were in the House of Representatives. Now, I happen to know that, but, I've run for Congress before. I am guessing that a lot of you don't know the answer to that question, and certainly the vast majority of Americans don't know, because it's not necessarily an important piece of information to know that there are 435 members of Congress. It was just members of the House, sorry, and then 100 senators, so 535 total. But, she was just trying to, pull a gotcha and to derail the conversation. And she kind of did succeed with the gotcha, because Jill Stein didn't know exactly how many representatives there were. So, sorry, I've got an ant crawling around on my glasses case. It's just really being annoying here, crawling around on my desk. Anyway, so let's have a look at this part of the conversation on the Breakfast Club, so you can just see the tenor of this conversation.
Wish list to have actual social programming.
I think that they're I give you the sun, the rain, the moon, the stars, the mountains. But there's really
who called it a wish list? You mean the same people that spend $1 trillion of y'all's money blowing up a.
Okay, well, I'm actually gonna rewind just a bit here to
that they've seen an opportunity for
show you what Butch
for negotiation, for hearing another perspective. I've been in the rooms with her on justice reform issues and others, helped to convene those rooms where she's been more open, because what we do know about how politics works is that it can't just be this wish agenda. I love a lot of what you all have on your agenda. I'll call it the after 7 ready or not agenda. I'll give you the sun, the rain, the moon, the stars, and mountains. But there's really
who called it a wish list? You mean the same people that spend $1 trillion of y'all's money blowing up other people's kids are saying it's a wish list to have actual social programming?
I think that's propaganda,
man. That's propaganda.
It's not propaganda. I'm saying it because I've worked on Capitol Hill. It's very difficult to get what you're trying to achieve. So just for example,
Jill can talk about what you can do just from the executive office.
Ware,
yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Just for an example, I'd love to know how many voting members in the United States House of Representatives.
Okay, so What does that have to do with the conversation they were having? You tell me. Does it have anything to do with it? No.
So we have been blocked. The Democrats throw us off the ballot. They interfere. They put spies and infiltrators on our campaign.
How many voting members?
So Jill's not getting that she's asking this dumb, irrelevant question. Initially, not getting that she's basically trying to derail the conversation. But then she does, and she gives the wrong answer, and Angela Rye is like, "Oh, gotcha."
Members
compare us.
No. Answer the question. How many voting members in the United States House of Representatives, Republican, Democrat, and Independent? How many total?
How many total are there? What is it? 600 some?
No, it's 435.
Plus 100 in the Senate, right?
100. Yes, I said House of Representatives. 100 in the Senate. Of those 435 in the House, of the 100 in the Senate, how many? Just one moment. I'm not trying to put you on the defense. I'm just saying this because the Hill is my passion. That's where I grew up as a professional, right? How many of them are Green Party members?
Okay, I know where you're going with
I'm
this.
Not going
you
anywhere.
are attempting to show that the Greens are powerless.
She's not going anywhere. There's just no agenda behind that question, other than to derail the conversation, or just trying to imply that, oh, it's hopeless. The Green Party can't possibly succeed, blah blah blah, without mentioning the context of why it's difficult for third parties to succeed. So let's see. I'll play a little more of this and see if there's anything worthwhile in this part.
I want to make the point.
I was not trying to show you're powerless.
Well, this is usually part of that argument.
What was the point you were trying to make, Angela? What was the point?
I'm going
before you rebuttal, Dr. Stein. What was the point?
I want to know how many voting members of the Green Party in the House or the Senate currently exist.
Okay, so he's asking, what is the point of your question? And she just repeats the question. Okay, anyway.
Currently, there are none. However, if you look at the American people, how many are voting against the genocide? Hardly any.
Dr.
How many
Stein.
are voting for healthcare as a human right, which would actually save us $500 billion a year? We, the people, are not represented. So being there is not a strike against the Green Party.
Okay, and that's fine. How many of them right now, based on, and I called it a wish list, it wasn't to be offensive, is I have a wish list too. I got one in the ideal man I want to.
It's dismissive to refer to a party platform as a wish list.
What I'm saying, what I'm saying is, it's not dismissive. Hear my heart, right? I heard your heart on the mispronouncing of Kamala. Hear my heart.
All right.
Because there are none that currently exist, that means you got to have allies. Who are your allies in the House and Senate
Excellent
to help
question.
See, if y'all would have just slowed down a minute, y'all had guns blazing.
I told you it was a healthy conversation.
Right? Like, come on. We got to do basic math.
Please let them finish.
You weren't talking to me when you said that.
But how many who are the allies? Can you name some of your allies in the House and the Senate that would help to get this very aggressive agenda done?
So let me tell you how the agenda would get done.
Yes.
For one thing, we need.
Name
let her answer.
My question. I want my question.
And it will get an answer.
Names.
Yes.
We'll talk about this.
So what I want to speak to specifically is town hall meetings, which used to require representatives to meet their districts. They don't do that anymore. They meet with their donors. Well, they largely meet with their donors. They're meeting with their donors like 90% of their waking time. They're hardly ever going to town hall meetings. I mean, we've been out there on the campaign trail, and when we mention this, we get nods all around the room, especially from the opponents of genocide, or from those who are demanding health care as a human right, or from those who want rent control across the country so that we can actually have secure housing in this country. There are so many things that the American people are demanding, but our elected officials are accountable to their donors. So you have got a catch-22 here. You have a very difficult system to change. How do you change it? And it only changes in a crisis. Yes. When did the third party come along? That is, it was the Republican Party, which was the abolitionist party. It entered into the scene, basically right before the Civil War. And they had been preparing for it, running and before the Republicans, there were other other abolitionist parties. But it's a long road to get there, and you have to work to get there. And, and then suddenly they burst on the scene when the time was right. And right now, we know that the American people are clamoring for other options. The other options, like namely us, we are the major option on the ballot across the country. We are being denied airtime. We're being censored. We're being silenced. We're being canceled effectively, very much by an explicit plan through the Democratic Party, which they've actually been explicit about.
I understand.
Okay, so I forgot to mention that a few minutes ago, but yeah, basically, Jill Stein has had one interview on mainstream media the whole campaign. She was on CNN after she had been brutally assaulted and then arrested when she was campaigning in St. Louis and was at a pro-Palestine protest. The cops assaulted her with a bike, so she got a mainstream media interview out of that, her only one thus far. This is the second opportunity that they've had to talk to a really large audience, the whole campaign, so that's a huge barrier when you can't be in the debates, you can't appear on national media and so forth. That's a huge obstacle to the Greens' success. A lot of people, when they watched this interview, they were like, because at one point, Butch Ware mispronounced Kamala Harris's name, and I do it too. Lots of people do, and she corrected him, and then he made the mistake again, and it was this whole argument for like a couple of minutes where she just couldn't stop talking about how horrible this was. It's like she was more concerned with whether Butch Ware pronounced Kamala's first name correctly than what he or Jill had to say. Okay, there was one other thing I wanted to two other things actually I wanted to show you from this interview. Two of their other attacks, both of them mainly by Angela Rye. Let me see here. Okay, minute 48. Let's go to there.
Foreign policy, which was a disaster by way of trying to bomb our way to peace in the Middle East. The second.
Okay, so what Jill is talking about here is how severe the threat of nuclear war currently is, thanks to the Biden-Harris administration's just constant warmongering. We're in a worse situation in that regard than we were under Trump, because, of course, we're in a proxy war with Russia, the other major nuclear power in the world. So she's talking about that, and watch what Angela Rye decides is more important to talk about instead.
Point was that we need a global Green New Deal because we have a crisis that impacts all of us. Yep. We need to move our money from the military to actually confronting our true, real threat to our survival, the climate. And the third thing being we need to get rid of the nuclear weapons. That too is a threat to our survival. And right now that is a law. That is a law of the land. The Nuclear Weapons Ban Treaty is now required by the United Nations. The vast majority of the world's nations have signed on, but not the Nuclear Weapons holding nations, not Israel, not Russia, not the US, not China. So I was there to promote those three things, not just to Russia, but to the world press,
But
which
this
was
a
gathered
Russian
there.
TV dinner, which American intelligence officials say is the Kremlin mouthpiece. And I'm curious, if you were there, you were sitting in this picture that I see.
So I was there to speak to global media, including the Canadian Broadcasting System, the BBC, China, India, world media, to know that there is another constituency within the U.S. We are not all about being empire, about conducting endless war against black and brown people around the world and ginning up nuclear weapons. And we have, by the way, led the charge in dismantling the nuclear treaties, so that right now we are risking nuclear war on 3 fronts. Did you know that one nuclear armed submarine alone contains the equivalent of 5,000 Hiroshima bombs? Nuclear confrontation is a threat to us.
Notice how Angela Rye is sitting there getting really upset about the fact that Jill Stein, has gone back to talking about what she wanted to talk about after briefly addressing this interruption to bring up her trip to Russia and basically imply, oh, you're a Russian agent or whatever.
Us all because of the nuclear winter thing. And there's so much which is not being addressed. There's so much which the American people deserve to know, including how much this is costing us.
Can I read you something, Dr. Stein?
Sure.
I'm just asking.
Great.
It says engaging with foreign assets is
okay. Yeah, I'm just asking, but I want to divert the topic back to her trip to your trip to Russia. So here we go.
The pattern for Dr. Jill Stein. Previously, the Senate Intelligence Committee investigated links between Stein's 2016 campaign and Russia's efforts to interfere in the election, while an indictment brought by Special Counsel Robert Mueller found that the Kremlin's Internet Research Agency had used social media to promote her candidacy.
So that
Angela's over there nodding, but watch her response. This is just a masterful. Just off the top of her head, just blows this talking point out of the water.
That has been
more than 1,000 times.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so the Senate Intelligence Committee, they don't mention what the finding of the Senate Intelligence Committee was, which was that there was absolutely no fault on my part whatsoever. The question that was raised there was, did Russian social media have an impact? And was I a beneficiary of that? And the Senate.
But they said you repeatedly parroted Kremlin views and posted a campaign video.
You know what they
from
consider
Moscow's
a Kremlin
Red Square.
view? They consider reparations a Kremlin view.
Oh.
They consider the civil rights movement actually a Kremlin view. They consider racial disparities a Kremlin view. So these are Department of Defense talking points, and these are unfortunately the DNC talking points as well, which repeatedly tries to smear me as a Russian agent, even though it has been
idiot.
Yes, and this has been very specifically
let's just be blunt about that.
Found lacking. And the report, get this, the report that was initially used to supposedly show that Russians had a social media campaign supporting me, that was written by a cybersecurity firm called the New Knowledge Corporation. New Knowledge had to disband shortly after publishing that because they were exposed for conducting an interference campaign themselves in the 2017 Senate election in Alabama. And how did they do that? They pretended to be a Russian influence campaign on social media. So they did exactly what they have accused the Russians of doing. They actually did, and put it under the false guise of being a Russian interference campaign.
So this is just such
totally.
Vladimir Putin or anybody in the Kremlin, anybody within his team? Have you ever had any
I have
conversations
tried
with them?
to and have never been able to, but that has been my goal, to actually advance each of these 3 absolutely critical issues. And in the words of John F. Kennedy, we must not negotiate out of fear, but we must not fear to negotiate. Look at the Ukraine war, for example, which is an absolute disaster. It is a war being fought to the last Ukrainian. No one is.
Okay, well, obviously you can watch the interview for yourself. So I'm just sharing brief parts of it here to make points about their participation in the smear campaign. just one other clip I wanted to show you. So just a little bit farther on, Butch Ware is talking about the fascistic response to the campus protest. He, by the way, is a college professor at University of California, Santa Barbara, a history professor there. So he was involved in the protest there at UCSB. So he's talking about how in the most democratic large state in the country, with a Democratic mayor in Santa Barbara and so forth, he the cops cracked people's heads, or let the fascist Zionists crack people's heads, and stood by and watched. Again, this serious topic is interrupted by Angela Rye, who would rather talk about how Jill Stein is a loser who can't win an election. Okay, let's see. Where was I going? 55, 45. All right, not much farther. Okay, close enough.
That is just to say that when we launched this campaign to try to actually bring people into this conversation, you see that this is actually where the American people stand. The American people do not want this forever war, and they do not want militarized fascists coming to their campuses to crack kids' heads open. I had to stand out in front of the encampment, and that's Democratic governor in California. That's Democrat, mayors in places like New York City. It's Democrats that are running cop cities. So the thing is, bro, fascism is already here. It's just that one of it is like fascism, and the other is fascism. But the truth is that the purple fascists, the purple imperialists, Team Red and Team Blue, are run by the same funders, and who funds you runs you. So there's a discourse about putting off fascism, but the reality is that fascism was already here, because we already can't speak freely. We already have people, university presidents, losing their job under democratic regimes. We already have kids that are lining up for peaceful protests, having their heads knocked open, or you have the cops standing to the side at UCLA so the thugs can knock kids' heads open. So I'm sorry, the fear mongering ain't gonna work on me.
The only thing that I would say to you is, I think it's very dangerous rhetoric to say there are two sides of the same coin. I do think it's important for us to
dangerous
understand.
To the Democrats, yes.
I think it's dangerous to all of us, actually. I don't have that privilege.
We disagree.
I understand. We do on a lot, but we also agree on a lot. But here's what I think we can agree on. Either you win or lose this election. There's really no in between. Dr. Stein, in 2002, you ran for governor of Massachusetts and you lost. In 2004, you ran for state representative in Massachusetts and you lost. In 2006, you ran for Secretary of the Commonwealth. You also lost. In 2010, you ran for governor again, this time against the first Black governor in Massachusetts, Deval Patrick. You lost. In 2012, you ran against this country's first Black president, and you got just less than 0.5%.
Notice how she's got to play up the identity politics here. You white woman, who's Jewish, by the way, you ran against Black people. What's wrong with you? And you lost.
Of total votes cast. In 2016, you ran against Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, losing significantly with 1.4 million votes cast for you, but 0 electoral college votes, which I agree with y'all needs to be abolished. But 136 million people voted. And you lost that election as well. So I want to know what the pathway to victory is for you in 2024. It can't just be.
I'd like to provide a different
frame. Shut your mouth. Watch your fucking mouth.
I want to provide.
And I also.
Can I respond, please? May I respond? May I respond?
Go ahead.
Well, I would like to respond. This is the framing of the empire and the oligarchy and white supremacy and colonialism, which wants you to feel that resistance is futile. This is about voter blaming and voter shaming.
Let me just.
Okay, so she is really pissed off because basically Jill has just pointed out that Angela Rye, a black woman, has put forth white supremacist and imperialist talking points where okay, you say the Democrats suck almost as much as the Republicans. They're fascistic in foreign policy and to some extent domestic policy. And you're accusing me of promoting white supremacist talking points. How dare you? So from this point on, she's just she pouts for the remaining 10 minutes of the interview.
No. What you're not going to say is that I'm ever parroting anything at the hands of white supremacy. This is something that's very different. This is me asking you again. It's a binary
I'm
choice
just
in an
pointing
election.
out that these
It is
are the
either a
talking
win
points.
or a lie. No, it's
These
not
are
a
the
talking
same
point.
talking points that the
I didn't get my
DNC
talking.
uses.
This is not DNC talking points. This is my research. And sadly for you, the research says you have never won an election. You have been successful in pushing forward certain agendas.
Okay, so never won an election. That's just a lie. Of course, she was elected to town council twice.
Absolutely.
As an advocate, but you have never won an election
are
as a candidate.
the one
Is that a
party.
winning strategy?
So in order to win, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And in this case, it's many steps. Let me point out, please, you need to compare the Green Party, not with those who are taking money from AIPAC and the War Machine and Wall Street. You've got to compare us, you have to compare us to other grassroots, non-corporate.
She told me I'm a white supremacist.
Okay.
She said I was parroting the talking points of a white supremacist.
See, that was my disappointment.
May I finish, please? May I get to my point? May I please
We're actually
get
going
to
to let
my
Dr. Stein and
point?
Angela Rye close it out.
Let me finish, please. Thank you. You're trying to compare us to the Democratic Party and the Republican Party with their billions of dollars, or to the Working Families Party, which is not under attack. As a people-powered party, not taking money from Wall Street or the War Machine or AIPAC, we are on very different turf. But if you compare us to all other similar parties, which are not taking corporate money, which are not bought and paid for, which can stand up against endless war, against homelessness, against the climate crisis, against the housing and the healthcare crisis. Campaigns like us, who can actually stand up for the people, they last exactly 1 to 2 election cycles, and then they're gone. So we are actually the pillar of strength among people-powered politics. And what have we done? Over that period, we have established the Green Party as the vehicle for people-powered politics. We have also launched the agenda, which has been adopted by the progressive Democrats, given lip service, not actually advanced. But whether you're looking at healthcare as a human right, launched by Ralph Nader as a national issue, reparations launched by our campaign as a national issue in 2012. If you look at free public higher education, bailing out students and ending student debt. You had Congress bailing out the crooks on Wall Street who crashed the economy, but not bailing out homeowners, not bailing out students. That agenda was launched by us. So I think it's not fair, and it is the talking point of AOC the other day, who is taking her marching orders from the DNC. This is exactly what they say, that we are only running for president.
Of color as parroting talking points instead of us looking at basic math. The one thing that AOC has done that you haven't is win some elections. And so when I'm asking you if you've won any elections, that is one point. If you want to tell me that you want to push a more progressive agenda, if you want to talk about pushing a progressive agenda, you can do that. Not by running necessarily for president. Your track record as a state rep candidate, as a secretary of the Commonwealth candidate, as a gubernatorial candidate, as a presidential candidate are woefully lacking. So I'm asking that you consider going about it a different way instead of telling me I'm parroting white supremacist talking points.
So I can tell you,
hear the facts. These are the facts. The numbers are not on your side, right?
So Dr. Jill Stein, let's end with some closing remarks.
Yes.
On your campaign, and then the Honorable Angela Rye, you can end with your
I'm done.
remarks.
I've asked my question.
Okay. So as Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. It never has and it never will. Like so many other Greens, I came from the world of social activism. I spent decades upon decades fighting for healthcare as a human right, for racially just redistricting. districting, which we actually succeeded in, for getting.
Computer won't pause this. Okay, yeah, I don't want to play her whole closing statement for you. Again, highly recommend that you watch this interview. Butch and Jill did a fantastic job, but this is part of a coordinated campaign. It seems like it seems extremely likely that Angela Rye, AOC, and all the other establishment Democratic politicians or supporters like Rye kind of received marching orders from the DNC to try and smear Jill Stein and the Green Party as ineffective and so on and so forth. Which, by the way, AOC has been rated one of the least effective members of Congress by a study, which I don't have to show you, but you can probably find it. But as Joe pointed out, there are all these things like the Green New Deal and Medicare for all, and so on and so forth, that were initially introduced by Green Party candidates, and then later adopted by so-called progressive Democrats, even though they're not really willing to fight for them. But anyway, the audience, which I assume there were a lot of Green Party people watching too, of course, but I'm sure the vast majority of the audience was just normie, liberals who really don't follow politics all that closely, let alone the Green Party, and they were just blown away by how articulate and informed and passionate about peace and justice Jill Stein and Butch Ware were, and totally turned off and offended by especially Angela Rye, but just the show that they regularly watch in general, like how the hosts had conducted themselves. They liked that they had them on, but there were well, first of all, just note the fantastic viewership they got. 145,000 views so far, which is one of their most viewed podcasts. 13,500 comments so far. Overwhelmingly, the sentiment of these comments was Angela Rye sucked, and Jill Stein and Butch Ware were great. And in a lot of cases, it was like, I've never voted before, or I've never even, I didn't know anything about the Green Party before, or Jill Stein or whatever. I am going to vote for Jill Stein, or I've been voting for Democrats my whole life, but this interview convinced me to vote for the Green Party. Dark Matter says, to see two black women being so hostile to two people fighting for black people is extremely disappointing. As a black woman who voted for Dr. Stein in 2016, I can confirm that there was a 0% chance I would have voted for Hillary or Trump. We are not mythical creatures. We are merely principled voters. You can thank Obama for radicalizing me on the dangers of supporting establishment Democrats. Donna Nasser says, this interview has solidified my commitment to never again vote for the alleged lesser of two evils. Latanya says, Angela slamming her laptop, folding her arms, and making faces is the same thing my 10-year-old niece does when she can't get her way. My favorite, Rye really thought she ate. I'm not sure what they mean by that. Pointing out that the Green Party had no congressional votes and nobody in Congress. But then Stein pointed out immediately that the American people have no congressional votes either. 90% of Congress's time is spent interfacing with corporate donors, not town halls where they meet with constituents. No matter how many comments get deleted, this video has gone viral and other content creators have picked up on Angela Rye's behavior. Angela and AOC have brought a large spike in attention to Dr. Stein and the Green Party. Dr. Jill and Dr. Butch were the two blackest people in the room. I love that. The way this backfired on the liberals is insane. They brought Stein and Ware on with ill intent, but judging by the comments, the people are moved by their message. We want a real change. I burst out laughing when Angela slammed her laptop shut and crossed her arms like a toddler. I wasn't going to vote. I am now. This lady has my vote. I'm proud of this comment section. I hope they all read it. They referring to the Breakfast Club hosts and guest host, and come to the realization that they too live in a bubble and are absolutely disconnected from the people. Angela Rye is an emotionally charged, condescendingly disrespectful, hot mess. As someone whose name has been mispronounced their entire life, I promise you it's not that serious. Genocide, on the other hand, is. Kudos to Dr. Stein and Dr. Ware for responding with grace in the face of Angela's blatant disrespect. It was hard to watch, but their message was worth it. I am an independent conservative, but I've gained so much respect for Jill Stein after this interview, and I was super impressed with Butch Ware. Y'all did the Green Party a favor. I'm going to read more about into Jill Stein. They would be the best executives this country has ever seen. Angela was brought on to cross-examine Dr. Stein and go to bat for Kamala. I don't know how successful that strategy was for Kamala, but Dr. Stein came out looking and sounding very knowledgeable and a clear moral choice in 2024. I've just decided to vote for Jill Stein and the Green Party. I'm so relieved that there's an alternative to the red and blue. I am an undecided black woman and a lifelong Democrat. I was disappointed to witness how the Breakfast Club utilized Angela Rye to openly undermine and disrespect Jill Stein right from the start of the interview. No other presidential candidate has been treated this way on their platform. Rather, they were gentle with her friend. I assume she means Kamala Harris, although that must not have been a recent interview because Kamala doesn't really do too many interviews these days. Okay, so again, I'll read a couple more. Angela is so petty and triggered. She's just mad Jill called her for what she is. A white supremacist in blackface, basically. You call yourself a lawyer. I mean, Angela, but maybe you just need to listen and learn more instead of arguing. I'm donating to Jill Stein's campaign and voting for her. Thank you, Angela Rye, for helping me to decide not to vote for Kamala. Brilliant job. So yeah, they just totally gave them wonderful publicity, and their attempts to discredit Stein and the Green Party just completely backfired, as did AOC's. And hey, I'm hoping the Democrats do more of this. Okay. But one thing I forgot to bring up is that there's a likely reason why suddenly out of the blue all these attacks have been launched. They seem to be getting desperate, even though the national polling average, as well as the battleground state polls, show that it's a very close race where nationally Kamala is slightly in the lead, and in the battleground states, it's basically a statistical dead heat. But here's the problem for the Democrats. Okay, where is it? Did I not have it called up? That was silly of me. Here we go. Jill Stein leads Kamala Harris with Muslims in these three battleground states, which new polling of American Muslims shows Green Party candidate Jill Stein leads Harris among Muslims in 6 battleground states overall, 30% to 28%, and Trump has single-digit support. And Stein leads outright in Arizona, Michigan, and Wisconsin among Muslim American voters. In Arizona, Stein has 35% support to Harris's 29. She also leads Harris in Wisconsin, 44 to 39. But the problem is most acute for the Democrat in the Wolverine state, Michigan, where nearly 250,000 Muslims live amid 8.4 million registered voters. Harris ekes out 12% support among Muslim voters, putting her not just behind Stein's 40%, wow, but also former President Donald Trump's 18%. And if you look at Arab Americans, you find similar but even bigger differences. Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee poll of Arab Americans, shows almost twice the votes for Dr. Stein as Harris, Trump 2%. Media keeps posting only Muslim American poll numbers, which are different and show an even split overall. But lead for Jill Stein, slight lead in a lot of battleground states. Conflating Muslim votes with Arab votes ignores millions of votes because a lot of Arab Americans are not Muslim. Mostly they're Christian if they are religious, which most of them are. So for Arab Americans, Dr. Jill Stein nationally is polling at 45.3% among Arab Americans, 27.5% for Kamala Harris, only 2% for Donald Trump, and 1.3% for RFK. So they can't stand either Trump or RFK for understandable reasons, and they don't particularly like Harris, or at least not as much as Jill Stein. So, as you might expect, a lot of Arab Americans or Muslim Americans have been convinced, for now at least, by Kamala Harris's noises about seeking a ceasefire and so forth. But 45.3% of Arab Americans basically see through this, see that she's not sincere, and basically supports this genocide. So they support Jill Stein. So that might be why the Democrats are panicking at this point. Okay, let me just briefly go through some of your comments that I hadn't gotten to. So Diana, who had this comment before, incorrectly stating that she hasn't won anything, said, Does anyone remember what the Green Party stood for? It was for climate change. Well, no, not just for that. The Green Party name certainly suggests that the Green Party is very focused on environmental issues, but in fact, the Green Party has, stands on more issues than, certainly than Kamala Harris has. Oh my goodness, I mispronounced her name. Good heavens, Kamala Harris. And they're the four pillars of the Green Party. Their four core values are grassroots democracy, social justice, nonviolence, only violence in self-defense or collective self-defense, and ecological wisdom. So one of the four pillars is about climate change and other environmental issues, but there's so many other important issues. The Green Party is, in fact, an explicitly socialist party. They're all about redistributing wealth and just fighting for reforms that will enhance the quality of life of ordinary Americans. They support reparations. They support peace in Ukraine, peace in Palestine, and so on and so forth. As well as, of course, the Green New Deal that they're famous for, that AOC stole. Circumvent reality, says Jabari Brisport, the Green Party candidate that AOC briefly campaigned for back when she wasn't smearing the Green Party. Wound up running as a Democrat later, so everything is going in the wrong direction. It is true that because of the constant attacks that the Green Party has suffered over the years, there have been ups and downs in the Green Party's success. And basically the pattern seems to be that when there's a close presidential election and the Democrat loses, such as in 2000 and 2016, even though there are actually other far more important reasons why the Democratic candidate lost, and we Green voters are not really the reason, because we don't support Democrats anyway, for the most part, or Republicans. Polls suggest the majority of us simply would not vote if our only two options were a Republican and a Democrat. But in any case, in the wake of George Bush's victory in 2000, where people incorrectly were brainwashed by the Democrats, many people anyway, were brainwashed by the Democrats into believing that Nader's run in Florida cost Al Gore that state and thus the presidency, even though, of course, several times as many Democrats voted for George Bush in Florida as Green supporters voted for Nader, which of course is not voting for Bush. And there was all this election fraud in Florida. Something like 30,000, mostly black voters were stricken from the voter registration rolls because they were falsely accused of being felons, which at the time, at least, someone with a felony record couldn't vote in Florida. So that's, as well as Al Gore's horrible campaign. Those are the reasons why Gore lost, not the fact that Ralph Nader, like third-party candidates do in every single election, was running for president, every single presidential election, there's third-party candidates on the ballot going all the way back to the early 1800s, right? So, if there's a close election and the more liberal candidate loses, I mean, you gotta consider other factors besides the fact that there are third-party candidates running, because a lot of times Democrats or whoever it is win, despite there being third-party candidates to their left running. But anyway, in 2004, the next election after Ralph Nader supposedly, quote unquote, spoiled Al Gore's election, the Green Party basically chickened out and ran David Cobb and Pat LaMarche as their ticket, who were supporters of a safe state strategy. They didn't campaign in places like Florida or other swing states. And people really didn't like that. It really pissed Ralph Nader off. He decided to run as an independent that year. And although he got far less votes than he did, far fewer votes, like a fourth as many as in 2000, he still got several times as many votes as the Green candidates with their wimpy milquetoast strategy. And that started a period of decline for the Green Party. They really were not successful either in 2004 or 2008. The number of candidates they were running gradually declined over the years. And it took Jill Stein running in 2012 and 2016 to kind of pump some life back into the Green Party. And then 2020 with Howie Hawkins was a total disaster, and we're down to about half the number of candidates in this election cycle as we were a few election cycles ago. But I think that's going to change because this campaign is catching fire. It might not achieve the 5% goal that the Greens have for getting maximum benefit as far as ballot access and federal election funding is concerned. But I think ultimately Jill and Butch will probably do about as well as Ralph Nader if I were to make a prediction today. And it could be more than that. Jill and Butch themselves say they think they have a chance to win, and they're not going to rule that out. And basically, Jill's argument is, if the vote is split 4 ways, or now it's down to 3 ways since Robert Kennedy dropped out, between Trump, Harris, and the most, the third party with the most support that's actually against genocide, the Green Party, it's possible they could win. I think it's unlikely, but as Tabitha says here, a vote for the status quo is a wasted vote. A vote for change is never wasted. Voting Green, Jill Stein 2024. Well, good for you, Tabitha. I unfortunately can't vote for the Greens because in my state, they're not even eligible as a write-in. So I'm going to vote for Claudia de la Cruz, I think, unless something changes and somehow they, file a legal case and are able to become write-in candidates. But I don't think that'll happen. So anyway, there's only half a dozen states that are swing states anyway. So, in the other 44 states, or DC, doesn't make a damn bit of difference who you vote for as far as the outcome. If you're, a person disenchanted with the 2 major parties, like I assume most of you listening to this are, it's not going to change the outcome in non-swing states, it has no chance of changing the outcome. So you may as well vote your conscience there. And if I lived in, say, Michigan, I would sure as hell be voting for Jill Stein. Because as I said last week, to be honest, even though traditionally left parties like the Green Party have said, have regarded the Democrats as the lesser of two evils, but still evil nonetheless, and therefore not worthy of support. I really think you could make a case that Kamala Harris is every bit as evil as Donald Trump. And so, I really don't give a fuck which of them wins. And it's not really about who wins anyway. It's about building for the future, building a movement. And I'm very optimistic that this run for president by Jill Stein and Butch Ware will make a significant contribution to building a movement to stop the genocide in Palestine and to build for the future and fight for social justice and ultimately win. So anyway, I really hope you will check out this interview. Go Jill Stein, go Butch Ware, go Green Party. We're going to make some waves come November. So I will talk to you soon. Take care.